Alan Wake 2 is a fantastic, original, and brave video game. Now, just to be clear, I think it's great, but I also think it has some issues, and I really want to talk about those issues and open up a discussion about it. I feel like due to the company that made it, who are much beloved, I think due to the stylistic approach and the way Alan Wake is so singular and artistic in its vision, I think we're overlooking some of the flaws. I want to discuss the greatness of Alan Wake. I also want to discuss the issues of Alan Wake. Alan Wake 2 is a really difficult game to review. It's a game that I think enthusiasts and critics will love, and clearly they do love, while I feel your casual or more time portal player may really not enjoy it. My reviews come from the perspective of gamers whose spare time is precious, and that's because a lot of the friends I've grown up with who I've played games with for the last 20 to 30 years, they've all got families, kids, other hobbies, and they have to allocate their time carefully. And I do question whether or not the average gamer would enjoy Alan Wake over its whole 20-hour runtime, because I definitely saw flaws in it, and I think a lot of people are masking over those flaws due to its fantastic atmosphere and artistic vision. And that's because Alan Wake 2 is more of an interactive episodic TV series in the mold of True Detective, Inception, and The X-Files. I know Inception's not a TV series, but you know what I mean in terms of the storyline. It's more of a TV series than it is a survival horror game in the mold of, say, Resident Evil or Dead Space. And it plays out like a TV series, each episode concluding with a fade to black in the theme song, creating a unique narrative structure. But I think my question is, does it play out well as a video game? As a spectacle, it sure is something, I can give you that. Now, I just want to be clear here, I applaud Remedy for having such a brave, singular vision for their game and going full steam ahead with it. It's to be respected, but I can't lie, at times, especially in the final few hours and chapters, I did wonder if this was even an enjoyable gaming experience anymore. The flip side to that criticism is that I feel like we should really support a developer that doesn't just trot out a generic video game clone 2075 and charge £70 for it. But my job is to give an honest review of Alan Wake and treat it the same as I would any other game. Just because the developer is much beloved and just because they're quite original doesn't mean I should overlook its flaws. There should be no preferential treatment because it's an artsy and mysterious game. Every game, in my opinion, should be rated on the same metrics here. So let's get into the good and bad of Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is an experience, of that there is no doubt. The merging of real movie-style cinematic clips, in-game cutscenes and dialogue create an electric connection between the player, person on screen and the characters in the game. Visually the game is stunning, it's gorgeous. This is immersive stuff, from the interactions with the NPCs, the facial animations and the conversations, dialogue, lighting, sound effects, the whole shebang. Bright Falls and the surrounding areas have this eerie feel to it. It's like one of those horror movies, you know, like Wicker Man, where you go there and everyone's in on this giant secret but you're not. It feels like that every single place you go to in Alan Wake 2. And this all leads to a game with an incredible level of tension, whether that's due to not knowing which shadows are going to attack you, not knowing where the enemies are going to pop out of, or when the next cheap jump scare is going to come from. And that's something I really have to talk about. The jump scares in Alan Wake 2 are, quite frankly, unnecessary and very annoying. It's a cheap trick that they don't have to use. The game is fraught with tension as it is, and if you want to use the type of jump scares they use in Alan Wake 2, use them sparingly. Holy crap, they are shoved in your face every 5 seconds is an over-exaggeration, but you get where I'm coming from. I imagine this is what it felt like for women on dating apps where they just get sent loads of, pictures of people's bits and against their wishes, it just kind of flashes up and scares you. I imagine that's what it's like, these jump scares in Alan Wake 2, except for rather than seeing people's jiggly bits, you see a crackhead version of Father John Misty. But outside of the jump scares, the tone, atmosphere and setting of Alan Wake 2 is so on point, it's tremendous, it really is. Narratively and story-wise, it's a real mixed bag. I don't mind the cerebral style storytelling that's on show here in Alan Wake, but at times it's downright confusing. And I think that's something you need to make peace with quite early on in Alan Wake. You need to make peace with the fact that you're going to be lost for large parts, and you're probably going to need to do some reading around the story points, the key moments in the story, maybe even watch a video where you can recap cutscenes and watch it again to get all the information. I'm not too keen on games that lean on that too much. I feel it gets the developer out of having to explain the story properly. And you can have a story that's too convoluted, and quite frankly I feel Alan Wake borders on that. Now the game's so good, in terms of immersion and atmosphere that it carries you through the parts where you're lost. You kind of want to keep pushing through the darkness to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that speaks volumes for the quality on show in other areas of the game, especially when it comes to how you feel towards the characters, what's happening to those characters, and how you want to unravel their story. Talking of stories, this is a story about a story coming true by somebody who can write stories into real life, then edit the stories he had written into being. Don't worry if you're lost already, I mean, just accept it, because it's only the beginning. This is Inception laced with a touch of X-Files and True Detective. Just hope you don't have a heart attack by a... There's 2 or 3 stories running parallel to each other or within each other at different times during Alan Wake, with doppelgangers and even a little bit of timeline manipulation thrown in. The writing is top tier, every character is written brilliantly, but the story itself is confusing. And I feel like Alan Wake 2 gets a bit of a free pass on this storyline being so obtuse, because it's a open quotes, end quotes, artsy game. And it gets a free pass, and I don't think other games would get a free pass on it. You could argue it's part of the charm, but I don't know, I'd like to be a bit more interconnected to the core elements of the story while I'm playing a game. But as I said, every character is really well written, warm, and has you rooting for them. What makes them even better is that they're all flawed, deeply so in many cases, which makes them even more human. Even down to characters that only have fleeting parts in the game, they all feel so real, and that is honestly what keeps you going back in those times that you are utterly lost in the scribbled out notes and rewrites of Alan Wake's multiple scripts. It's the people in this world that keep you going. And that's a testament to Remedy and their ability to write incredible characters and stories. Everybody from Saga to Wake, Tor to Odin, Breaker to the girl in the nursing home who I forgot her name, they're all compelling and often at times funny. And I have to say, a quick one on the comedy. Despite this being a survival horror, holy hell, Alan Wake 2 can be really funny. It's used sparingly, and that makes it all the better. By now, most people would have seen a certain level in the game which just has you rolling on the floor. It's a classic moment in gaming, utterly brilliant, and a standout moment not just in this game, but in gaming this year. Now comes the big talking point, the debate point of Alan Wake 2. Gameplay is where I have some serious issues. I'm surprised more reviews haven't touched on this or mentioned it as a core sticking point in Alan Wake. I don't think Alan Wake really plays that well. I mean, look, it's serviceable, but damn, the general flow of the game, well, it's very broken. There really isn't a flow because the game is constantly going in and out of menus, maps, case files, mind places. You could argue that that's exactly the point. It's a kind of detective game. Does it work for a video game? That doesn't mean I don't like what they did with the mind place. The mind place is really original. It's a really clever way of having the player figure out where the next waypoint is, basically, rather than just sticking waypoints on a map. But going back to it and constantly just having to, by trial and error, just stick things on different parts of the board until it all clicks into place and it tells you where to go, it got a bit long after a while. I think if the mind place was a section of the game, it would be cool, but considering it's in every aspect of the game, it wears thin for me. Now, even worse than the mind place is Alan Wake's plot board. Now, Alan Wake can basically rewrite real life by changing plot elements in his story. I'm not going to go on about this too much, but the best way to describe how I felt about Alan Wake's plot board and how it was used in puzzle solving was, it was kind of like being given a bunch of jigsaw pieces, but not being shown what the completed jigsaw looked like, so you didn't know what you were aiming for. And it really, sometimes it's just downright confusing. It just feels like trial and error sometimes, and a very boring kind of stick a note here and there type of trial and error as well. But look, Remedy's approach to rewriting the story through scenes and plot points is unique, brave, and original, though I don't feel it will be to every player's liking. And then we move on to criticisms that other games would be absolutely nailed to the wall for, and Alan Wake just seems to get a free pass. I mean, there's like 3 enemy types in the whole game. Like in the whole game there's 3 enemies. I mean, that's pretty wild. When did this become something that we just ignore? Luckily, I think the gunplay is pretty solid. Or at least there's like a little mechanic where you shine the light on the enemy and it kind of makes them weaker and opens up a weak point, etc. Look, it's nothing mind-blowing, but it's better than just pumping bullets into an enemy. I did, however, enjoy the boss encounters, not because the actual encounter was anything special, but I loved the way they kind of built up this evil aura around this entity that was kind of lurking in the shadows, and then at the end of that level or chapter you would face that monster, and it would just be so much more terrifying due to the build-up. The aura they kind of give this entity is excellent. I do feel that in terms of gameplay, the plot board, and the mind place, they could have really narrowed all of that down and given it a bit more focus, and it would feel less like busy work. Despite its flaws as a video game, Alan Wake 2 offers a compelling story set in an atmospheric and immersive world. However, the intricate storytelling may hinder the overall gaming experience for some players, requiring additional research and analysis to fully grasp the narrative. Whether or not you think that is a good or bad thing is going to be really down to individual tastes. In conclusion, Alan Wake 2 is a unique, vibey game more than a video game that blends elements of the X-Files, Lost, True Detective, Inception all into one. Its seamless integration of real-life video and cinema with video game characters elevates the emotional connection to the characters. If you are seeking a game for combat and gameplay, Alan Wake 2 may not be the ideal choice, but for those craving a distinctive, unique narrative journey where you play both creator and detective, it's worth the investment. Just be warned of the jump scares. If I was to give Alan Wake 2 a score, I'd be feeling a solid to strong 8. For those new here, I have a scale of light, solid and strong when it comes to giving a score to a game. So a light 8 would be lower down on the 8 scale, closer to a 7, and a strong would be closer to a 9. Not that confusing, but yes, I think this sits nicely in the middle of the 8s, edging towards a 9. And that's it really. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, take care.